got a letter from Chance's lawyers. I'm just laughing at this point because there's no way this happens. How does Chance the Rapper have lawyers? He does, and they wanted us to forfeit all of the hats, and then we had to show how much we made from the hats and give him that money, as well as cease and desist and not sell them in the future. And supposedly, most of our revenue came from these hats. I won't confirm or deny, but I went into the back end and switched around the lowest selling product we had, which probably only shifted a couple of units that week at most, maybe one, and just renamed it on the back end to Chance the Rapper 3 hat. I took that hat from the back end and renamed it to like Red Hat, something like that. I export the dashboard and I'm like, hey, we're really sorry. We have 3 hats in inventory and we sold 2 and it made us $60. I'll send you the money and we'll cease and desist. Where do you want us to send it to? Of course, they have no interest in claiming $60 and 3 hats, so they leave us alone. I switch over the products and it continues printing, supposedly.
Yeah, that's one hell of a crazy story. And that's one thing that I want to tie into is like the way you and other people at that time were running ads is way different from this time. Like the practices that people were running back then probably wouldn't work now, other than like the fundamentals. And do you agree that this is kind of like how music works? Because I've seen, and like shout out to Russ, but like the way he kind of talks about it is like he blew up in a different time, and what worked for him will likely not work for someone right now. And they need to look to someone that is independent and blew up maybe within the last 18 months and be like, oh, what did this person do? And they're much closer to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look back, we can go all the way back to 2005, 2006 when Soulja Boy released Crank That. I mean, there's so many ways of producing and making music. There are some standards which stick the same. We're all using Fruit Loops, Logic, whatever it may be. But there's a way of getting it out there. Now, Soulja Boy made it work because specific things existed which don't exist now. What existed back then? Pirated LimeWire. So he would create songs or file names called 50 Cent in the club. Songs which are verified, everyone's downloading them on LimeWire. They download it and it plays Crank That. And people are like, this is pretty good. And they find out it's Soulja Boy. Soulja Boy is promoting heavily on MySpace and getting a lot of attention from there until he gets his deal. But if we were to deceive people like Soulja Boy did back then, the backlash would be different, even if the song is good. If we were to promote it heavily organically on a place like MySpace or Facebook, it would not work like it did for him. There's been a shift. And then even if we look more recently, there's been artists who maybe blow up specifically on SoundCloud. We have the SoundCloud generation. They'd upload the file, the comments on it would be crazy, and they'd blow up into mainstream success. If we upload on SoundCloud today, you're not going to see that same success, to the point where the whole meme of posting the SoundCloud link doesn't even exist anymore because people don't use SoundCloud links. And then before that, people were making money on like Reverb and TuneCore, whatever it may be. What stands the same is it's not necessarily about the music. There's arguably good and bad songs which both reached ridiculous numbers. It's about the way of promoting it and thinking outside the box, even if it means doing something which works and doing it better. You've probably seen it on Instagram comments, on Facebook, Twitter comments, whatever it may be, especially YouTube comments. Check out my music. It's a way of marketing and self-promotion, but it's inefficient. Because what reason do I have to listen to your music? I don't know who you are. I don't know what the song genre is. I don't know if it's good. And when everyone else is telling me to listen to their music too, who am I going to listen to? That's what the consumer sees in those YouTube comments. If only one person said, listen to my music, maybe they'd get some views. But everyone does it. So you have to stand out. And there's different ways of doing it. There's probably ways which work successful to this day, which will last for a long, long time. But there's always going to be something new. I don't know what the next thing is going to be. Someone is going to surprise us. But what we can say is it's not what X did. It's not what Soulja Boy did. It's not what someone who's already blown up has did. It's not going to work the same way Russ did it. Things have changed. It's been 7 years. But what does exist is a way to make it happen, and there is going to be a solution which lies exclusively in marketing. Doesn't matter how good the song is if only 3 people hear it. The song has to propel itself. and maintain its relevancy and get a rate of growth which will keep it being played regardless of how it sounds. And that's all in the marketing and distribution. People spend, I think, too much time working on getting the right album, the perfect project, but the taste is subjective. It's the right distribution system. People will make I reckon there's thousands of albums which are flawless and amazing, but they just never got the reach in marketing.
So the whole take of like, and this is, I have this strong disdain for this taste, which is like, oh, just make something amazing and that's it. And I'm like, well, it's not really it. But if you, I think if you consistently make something amazing and make maybe like a light effort, then you don't have to put in as gargantuan of an effort into marketing, because people are like, whoa, there's this element of, I feel like we have when something is not viewed very much and we discover it and it's incredible beyond belief, and then like it kind of triggers like a word of mouth thing where it's like, whoa, I have to show somebody this, like, who is this person?
Well, yeah, there's like a cultural shift as well. You know, we loved sharing things before online. We'd even email people like YouTube videos or something, and that would be bigger in the culture back then. And now it's more gate kept. So if something is good, you tend to keep it to yourself, even when it's music. And you know, what we're seeing right now, from my perspective, is TikTok is kind of leading the way in terms of distribution. But also, you know, if anyone's watched Genius, the Kanye documentary, people would always say 5 beats a day for 3 summers. And it's basically just a way of inadvertently saying perfect your craft, get your 10,000 hours in. Realistically, at the end of those 3 summers, you would have achieved one thing, which is you'd be very good at what you do. You'd have a great catalog of beats and they would have gotten better over time. But if you watch that documentary, he was going into those offices begging for a chance. He was networking with everyone he could have to get his music heard. And even then, like, people didn't like it and they were wrong, so he still distributed it himself. It wasn't his talent which got him in those meetings, it was his persistence and ability to market. The whole college dropout branding, the big teddy bear head, the backpack, it's part of the branding. It wasn't just because he was super talented. His music is great. It wasn't what single-handedly made him successful. It was just in 2003, 2004, that's how you distribute. There's so many artists which took off from TikTok. CJ, Whoopty, TikTok carried that song. Ice Spice to a degree. Munch, TikTok carried that song. It was the first big rush of distribution. Even outside of hip-hop, you could argue like Clairo got a big push of success on YouTube and TikTok, and her dad's a record label executive, which helps as well. But you know, there's just ways of getting out there. And the benefit from my point of view right now is TikTok and Instagram Reels, because it takes away one of the biggest challenges in marketing, which is you have this product, how do you actually get it out there? Well, TikTok has alleviated that. If you put out a video, it's based on a merit-based system. Look at how we scroll TikTok. Do you look at what your friends are posting, or you just scroll through the For You page because the algorithm is so good at showing you what you want to see? And that's the way it works. If you produce something based entirely on its merit, it will get pushed out there for you, and it will give you the reach without you having to find the people. That didn't exist in 2007. It didn't exist 5 years ago. It barely existed 3 years ago. Now all you need to do for a short amount of time while it works is get a really good product, get a good song, good beat, whatever it may be, and let the algorithm decide. Let it push it out. It will give you the distribution for yourself, and take advantage of it, because it will be a different system in a few years' time. But one of the biggest challenges in marketing has been taken care of for you as of right now. And here's the thing. Instagram Reels wants to compete with TikTok. YouTube Shorts wants to compete with Instagram Reels. You put out this content in the form of, in this video, in this format, and so long as you post your music like this in this vertical video, it will get out there. So an example strategy would be creating this song, so long as it sounds right, getting it out to a bunch of TikTokers and creating a dance around it. Then that song blows up if you can orchestrate that campaign, and it will do good on YouTube and Reels and TikTok, where they're all fighting. A lot of YouTubers got really big lately because of the success they've seen on YouTube Shorts. I'm sure you've seen it. You know, YouTubers with 2,000, 3,000 views on their actual videos, but they got 250,000 subscribers because their shorts just keep on hitting. And it's because Shorts is doing the distribution for him. So, that's what works right now. Take with that information what you will, and there'll be a different challenge in a few years' time.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about how there was some guy within the past couple of, like a year, I would say, that blew up off of that. This white dude, these three of them actually. Connor Price blew up like that. This dude, Nick D, blew up like that.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they do music with Hoodie Allen. I don't know if he blew up like that too. These guys literally, a friend of mine who was like an independent artist who recently sold his catalog actually, came up on a bag.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, and he showed me them because he was at this point where he had like 2 million monthly listeners, and he's like, yo, how do I push this forward? Like, I'm kind of like at this weird spot. And these guys were blowing up like crazy, and it was pretty much like TikTok, IG Reels, and YouTube Shorts. Like, this guy was gaining maybe like 300,000 subs a month.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah.
And it was strictly like centered around his music. He was also like had some acting experience, and this guy blew up like crazy. I mean, some of the songs were bangers.
I mean, like, we really saw it like come into effect and validate it as an idea when Drake made Doozy Slide. He made that to become a TikTok dance. Yeah. He's never expressed any interest in making a song remotely like it, but then he saw the trend, wanted to hop on. How well it did is debatable, but it was very much made to be a TikTok song, which he made, in the middle of the pandemic in his own house.
And that's the argument where people say like, oh, TikTok ruined music, this and that. And you make the perfect mention of it, which is what I always say, which is, hey, this is just a distribution platform, and they're not forcing this. It's based on the user. Like, if the users are following into it, then that's what people want to see and want to hear.
If TikTok and YouTube and Instagram gave us content which we didn't want to see, we wouldn't use the apps or the websites. The reason we're so hooked on these apps is because they're giving us more of what we want to see. And if that music, which is getting pumped out, is music which people enjoy listening to, then that's what's relevant. People say TikTok ruined music. They'll say SoundCloud ruined it. They'll say YouTube ruined it. They'll say everyone having a home studio ruined it. What's actually just happened is it's become more accessible every step of the way.
With that being said, though, a lot of these songs, especially 2020, 2021, a lot of these songs are blowing up. Short songs, people didn't really care about the artist. There wasn't much investment outside of that snippet or the song. And we saw a bunch of people getting signed, like random, like that girl, if you remember her, PP Cocaine, the Corvette guy. I don't know if he actually ended up getting signed.
I mean, the fact that we're not saying their names, like...
Stay Solid Rocky.
Okay, yeah.
So we a bunch of these people got signed. They did nothing after. Like, they completely flopped. They either got dropped or they got shelved. So do you think this is kind of creating this new, like, emptiness where people may get a hit, but it's different to sustain a fan base?
Yeah, I mean, look, the concept of like a one-hit wonder has always existed, more so now because everything is just so fast-paced and trends are just, transitioning from one to the other at a way faster rate. But at the same time, even if you get your music out there and you get signed, it's still ultimately on you and the help of your label to maintain that relevancy. We've seen people who have been successful for years kind of have their fall off, and sometimes it just happens right after the first hit. But once you have that boost, what I will say is it's much easier, surely, to have a second big hit if already people have listened to the first one and you have somewhat of an audience, more than you had the first time. It's much easier to get the second one than the first one. It's up to them if they want to put out the right music. I think there's artists who we assumed would be a one-hit wonder that proved us wrong, and then there's artists we wanted to hear from, which we never did. But it's, as being an artist and working in a label, whatever it may be, they have to understand the market and what people want to listen to. And if they don't put that out, then the market will respond and stop playing them.
Yeah, I feel like pretty much everybody thought was going to be a one-hit wonder was Lil Nas X.
Yeah, and then he just kept on working with the format, going into the audience, which was giving him the most attention. And he maintained his relevancy, and he's like still relevant to this day. He has a huge audience on like Twitter and whatever it may be. He's a very, very good marketer. Before he was Lil Nas X, his Twitter page used to be a Nicki Minaj parody account, and not like a little one, like a wildly successful one, which gave him an audience to put out a song like Old Town Road, which they would have resonated with or at least enjoyed. or at least there's an audience present to hear it.
Yeah, because I was saying he's one of the most brilliant like marketing guys in music in general. Because he recently came out again. Because I was thinking about him the other day, pause, and I was like, "Yo, what's Lil Nas X doing right now? Like, are people gonna say he fell off? Because he just comes back with bangers. But
Yeah,
the new thing that he came out with, I don't know if you saw it. He was basically like, oh, he's with Christ now, right? He's making a Christian song. This community is one that he's gone back and forth with and has been inflammatory towards. They kind of all react to him. They give him the promo he wants. Kind of everybody wins in this situation because these guys are outraged for views and they get their views, and he gets them outraged for his base to get outraged at them. So the people that hate him that make content win and he wins. But yeah, one of the things he recently said was like, oh, making Christian music doesn't mean I can't suck dick no more. The two are not mutually exclusive. I'm allowed to get on my knees for multiple reasons. This is like some crazy copywriting right here, first of all.
it's like, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, really good copywriting. But how long will it work for? That's the question, right? Like, we see it as well with, like, we spoke about it, like Andrew Tate. The points are right, the points are wrong, whatever it is. How long can you talk about men are this, women are bad? You can only have the discussion for so long before it gets boring. The same way Lil Nas X can only have the conversation of talking about he's gay, whatever it is, trying to anger the Christian community. It'll work until it doesn't, and I hope he transitions. I will say it's been going on for a little while, maybe longer than it needed to, because the Satan shoe he did with Mischief has its own branding issues right now, and that was like well over a year ago, and he's still kind of playing into it. I hope he transitions into something else before people get bored, because what I've noticed is people get bored very quickly now if people milk something.
And that's the whole thing with him too, is I'm looking at it like, yo, aren't you past this, in the sense that this guy's delivered multiple hits. I think the reason why he can keep it going is because the music actually, like, it's pop music, and he makes it in such a way where people are like, yo, this is really, really catchy. It's infectious. I'm like, Are you going to get to the point where you're kind of just known for more than just inflammatory marketing that you've done?
Yeah, and there's people who did it with good music and people who did it with bad music. Lil B released that album where he said he's gay. The game flipped out, couldn't believe what he was hearing. And but enough people liked his music for it to work. I think the music got boring over time. I'm not trying to get cursed. I was a Lil B fan as well. But he was very good at, like, inciting a conversation and getting people angry. Especially, like, when he titled his album at a point in time where, like, that would never run in hip-hop. So for Lil Nas X to do the same thing, because it's still not a thing in hip-hop, is impressive. But the major difference is people are consistently listening to Lil Nas's music. Lil B never really had the same reputation in music as much as he did for being the bass god and being the brand and being insane. That's what he's really known for. Lil Nas X, he would say he's a musician.
Yeah. And one of the things that you said yesterday when I completely fucked the interview, so we're running it back today.
We're running it back twice. For the people listening, this is the second day we've done it in a row. We're recording it. I'm trying to think in my mind, what did we speak of yesterday, so I can, like, get ready for that part of the conversation. Yeah, but we're running it again.
yeah, exactly. So twice in a year. Twice in 2 days, actually.
Twice in 2 days.
So one of the things that you said was that you think one of the people that has the best chance at creating a brand in fashion would be Jack Harlow.
Potentially.
Yes, potentially.
Yeah. Because he's just got a universal fan base. It's not just hip-hop fans. It's women, white women, people who don't typically listen to hip-hop. He's got fans in all over the world listening to Jack Harlow. So if you have a fan base that strong, it makes sense to put out a product or a line. Especially considering it won't be anything that's so out there. Because Jack Harlow's whole brand is being pretty relatable and pretty normal for the most part. Which is not the case from other brands you see, where they're just so out there that people wouldn't wear it, or it's too unique for the mainstream to wear it. It can even happen in streetwear. So if an artist was to do it, it could be Jack Harlow. The reason is for year after year after year, he's maintained his relevancy. So we can assume safely that in the coming years, his career will probably continue. That's vital for a brand to exist. The name behind it must also be relevant. He can't then just step into the shadow once that brand is out. And then it goes back to the audience. And I think, he's expressed a lot of creativity. The range in his catalog is definitely present. And I think that's a quality which is needed when it comes to making clothing. Otherwise, you're just going to make the same t-shirts and the same sneakers, and it's not going to be a thing in 3-4 years time.
Do you think, I kind of want to go over like some hip hop brands, some that did well, some that fell off. Like for example, you remember I think it was Eminem had this brand. It was Shady something.
A lot of them created and they were more like they were merchandise lines than they were brands. And I think a really good example of that is G Unit. You can buy a G Unit t-shirt today, right? But it's not a clothing line. It doesn't have stores. It's not in wholesalers or anything. It's just he's selling t-shirts on the internet and making a lot of money. It's technically a brand, but it's not really. And it was quite similar with what we saw with Eminem back in the day. A lot of these things were usually just merchandise lines.
Do you think the merchandising lines have changed on YouTube though? Because looking back in the day, merch was like a viable way for a lot of people that were making videos and they made money from. But slowly it turned into, hey, everybody's got merch. What makes yours better? And it became more, I feel like, either movements or brands that were the ones that pulled ahead. Even for really popular YouTubers, their merch would flop. For example, one of the early ones that I think was merch, but also like a brand at the same time, and also seamlessly went into his content, was like when Roman Atwood had like Smile More. It was like this whole positive thing, and he was like this family, like middle America white guy in Ohio making these vlogs, and he was like very positive. And I don't even want to imagine how much money he made from that.
Roman Atwood, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He's one of the greatest marketers of all time. You got to remember, he disappeared off YouTube for almost 2 years and came back as if he never left. And yeah, Smile More was for the most part a t-shirt company, but then he created this whole community and brand behind it. And the overarching message was, smile more, embrace positivity, don't let things get to you. And then it became extremely successful, even though it started off as t-shirts. And we're seeing it now, like the merch has to become more creative. And you'll know this more than me, but I believe previously Billboard would account for merch as album sales, and now the merch has to be sold separately and not bundled with the album, so it doesn't contribute to the album sales as much, which means you have to make a really enticing bundle, and the merch itself has to be cool. So I think Nav did something with Pleasures instead of just making regular t-shirts, and you're seeing a lot of cross collaborations with brands and artists, which is amazing because number one, the brand wins, and it has the infrastructure, the production, the expertise to produce at mass these items. So you have, initially Kanye was with Adidas. That was important to Kanye, as was the Balenciaga partnership, because they had the ability to produce these clothing. And then you see it with Travis Scott and Drake partnering with Nike instead of just making their own sneakers. They're partnering with someone who knows how to make sneakers more than anybody else. But there's also a brand attached to Nike, which you could argue has some relevancy. Tech fleeces, it makes Nike look cooler. Adidas having Y3 makes Adidas look cooler. So the brands benefit, the artists benefit, and you get some crazy collaborations along the way. Audemars Piguet has a collaboration with Travis Scott. And it's big in the world of business because people think Travis Scott is so popular, Kanye West is so popular, Drake is so popular. It is a blessing for these brands to be able to do a collection with him. But they put a lot of money and investment in these collaborations, and it's dependent entirely on the personal brand of the artist. With Kanye West, with whatever he said, it hurt his partnerships, not because they weren't making money, they absolutely were, but because now Adidas has shareholders and they cannot say we're associated with this person. If a huge scandal came out around Drake, Nike would have to cut their losses, let all that inventory go to waste, and have to seize the partnership. It's a huge financial risk on the brand too, but it's definitely mutually beneficial. And it kind of ties into elevating merch and giving it a level where it's no longer merch, it's an actual arm of a bigger brand.
Was this a surprise to you that, I don't know, I think AP is the first collaboration that has done something with Travis Scott since the Astroworld incident?
I'm not surprised that brands are working with Travis Scott, because the whole Astroworld situation, as sad as it is, happened in a city close to me, Houston. It wasn't like Travis Scott orchestrated that to happen. I don't think anyone think he's personally responsible. I think it's got to do with the venue. I think it's got to do with the stage organizers. I don't think Travis Scott really would want this to happen or could predict it happening. This wasn't the first Astroworld either. It's happened before. Nothing like this happened. Which is why I don't think he faced the backlash people may have expected. It's clearly not him. Similar to the Alec Baldwin situation. He didn't really murder someone. The gun was loaded.
Yeah, I think Alec Baldwin got a lot of hate for that one. I was like, this isn't really his fault at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the real question is, actually, no, I'm going to leave that one for after this. The box set thing is very unique because that's the new thing. It's like not really merch. You have to sell a physical album with it. You used to be able to bundle a digital album, which nobody was really using because, hey, they're just going to listen to it on Spotify. It's way more convenient for them than to download this digital album they got sent to their email.
Yeah.
So now the rule is they also have to ship out all merchandise within the sales week. So they have to have the infrastructure to be able to ship out tens of thousands, if not for some, hundreds of thousands of units within 7 days. Whereas back then, it used to be pre-orders and they would ship 4 to 8 weeks, or infamously, if you were a Frank Ocean fan, you weren't getting it ever.
Well, you know what the other thing is? You have to predict your own album sales, because you're not going to produce it and ship it in 1 week. You have to make it ahead of time. So if you think you're going to sell 50,000 copies, you're going to have 50,000 units in the right sizes ready to go before the album even comes out.
And that's something that Taylor Swift was able to do.
I feel like Taylor Swift is one of the only artists who can, at a baseline, predict she'll sell 1 million units first week or whatever it may be. I think there's really a handful of artists on the globe which can do it. But for regular artists who would bundle and do this stuff, it's interesting they have to have them ready to ship in the first week. I think it's a good thing for the consumer, though, because I think people are just tired of waiting months and months for merch to arrive.
Yeah. What was your favorite Travis Scott collaboration?
I wasn't personally gravitated to any of them because it's not necessarily my style, but I think my favorite one will be this collaboration with Audemars. If it's one which is already out, it's probably the Cactus Jack Nikes. Like it's probably that. They had a really good resale market for a long time. They were trading for well over $1,000, and it was an interesting one. And I think just from a design point of view, it was cool with the reverse swoosh, stuff like that. But I wasn't buying it. I saw them in person. But I think this AP collab is ridiculous because AP doesn't do collabs like that. They did one with Black Panther, and that's pretty much it. They're extremely rare to come across. And for them to embrace Travis is wildly interesting because AP comes from a lineage and a customer base which is not that of Travis Scott and his fan base. It's a very different crowd.
Yeah, for me, I would say if it was the product, I would say the shoes. But I think the McDonald's collaboration was such a monumental shift. I mean, they kind of ruined it afterwards by giving it to any and everybody. Like even Saweetie had a McDonald's collaboration.
They had a Saweetie meal, and I think they had like who else had one? There's like a BTS meal or something.
There was a Saweetie meal. There was a BTS meal. Cardi B and Offset had one, and he was a Latin artist. I've listened to his
J
album.
Balvin.
J Balvin.
You know what was cool about the McDonald's collaboration? 2 things. Number one, it was wildly cheap for people. You would get like a quarter pounder of fries and a drink and something else for like $6, which is cheaper than those single items added together or very close. Also, the marketing around it became such a meme, which really helps with the promotion around it. You'd have the videos of like kids going in the drive-thru saying, you know what I'm here for. And you know those McDonald's workers have PTSD even when I say Travis Scott meal. So I just love like the event around it. I don't think it was manufactured. I just think that's how it was responded to. But it's not one which stuck because I forgot it even happened until you brought it up.
That is true. I think it was at that moment, which kind of circles back to Sway, infamous Sway, Kanye West. I think this is something you can give some good insight on. There was famous, you don't got the answers.
Yeah.
Later on, more recently, Ye was kind of like, yeah, you know, Sway was kind of right. What is your perspective on that situation at that point in time specifically?
I don't think Sway backed his reason or gave enough reasoning at the time. Despite being correct, he could have justified it a little better. Also, I think Kanye was at a point in time where he was just, I wouldn't say not himself, but I just think he was under a lot of stress, under a lot of factors in business, which he wouldn't have time to explain. And also, Sway was mentioning how he lost a lot of money in a similar endeavor, so it's hard to listen to someone who's failed in giving you advice, even if that advice is correct. Sway lost well in excess of $100,000 doing the same thing, so how can he propel that advice? But he just executed it wrong. So in retrospect, and it's really cool that Kanye is even admitting that he was wrong. I think that's important. For someone that successful to admit they're wrong is honorable.
Because that's one thing, because it's simple to say, oh, why don't you just do this yourself, right? And take out this middleman. Like, you're as famous as you are, right? You're like, yeah, you worked with these brands. You already had the Nike thing going at the time. Or was that? No, he was upset at Nike at the time.
He was upset at Nike because, you know, the product they made together was outstanding, but the issues he had with Adidas were the issues he had with Nike, and I don't think one's right and one's wrong. It's just you have to understand the perspective. And I think Kanye's issue was more out of frustration. Like, he needs Nike's infrastructure, but he doesn't like having to do business and make compromises with a board, even though that's what business is. And it's not even about Kanye being rich. Kanye probably had hundreds of millions of dollars at that time, but, you know, it costs a lot of money to set up a similar infrastructure. It costs more, really. And we can kind of see that when the pandemic happened. We had an abundance of money, and we needed to produce these masks or whatever it was to stay alive, supposedly. And yet all the money in the world, and there were still absurd delays in getting these things in everyone's hands and everyone's houses. It's just a time and infrastructure challenge more than it's a money one. And Kanye needed to get something out quickly. So that probably frustrated him. And as much money as he had, it would have taken much, if not all of it, to produce the operation he needed. But Balenciaga would have been a good middle ground because they have the Kering backing, you know, the company which owns Gucci and a lot of the other houses. They have the facilities. As well as working with Demna, who is Balenciaga's creative director. So they would have had less issues compared to what he would have with Adidas and Nike, where they think differently.
Was Matthew Williams the guy that was like, you know, my twin going to deliver a classic?
Probably.
Was that
Matthew Williams owns Elite Studio, and he's a creative director of Givenchy. He was, you know, in that Holy Trinity with Virgil and Heron Preston. It sounds like something he would say, but Matthew Williams is probably one of my favorite designers of all time. Top 3 without fail.
Yeah, he was, because that was when Whole Lotta Red was on its way out, or was about to drop.
It probably was Matthew Williams.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That became like a legendary meme.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
So one thing I want to get is, what do you think are the top 3 money Twitter beefs?
That I was not expecting that one.
Yeah.
Through us. Okay. Of all time?
Sure, of all time. I've got a funny list in my head.
All right, let's just one precursor. Does the beef have to be between 2 people in that side of the internet, or can it be one? Because if it's one, I'm putting myself in there.
It can be one. It can.
Okay, in that case, I'm putting number 1 is obviously myself. I'm putting me with the OnlyFans worker. I think that's the tweet you saw in retrospect, actually, when OnlyFans was making some adjustment to their TOS where it would have to be like pinup content, but not full pornography. It'd have to be like a Playboy magazine. And then some OnlyFans creator was like, I'm going to lose my bread and butter over this, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, don't care, don't forget my fries. And it created like a civil war on Twitter for a good couple of days. To which luckily we won, all thanks to God. And then I'd say 2 and 3 would probably be It's an interesting one, and it's funny because I'm trying to explain it to your audience in a way where they can understand it because it's such a niche space of the internet.
Yeah.
But I would have to say, the Culty Bra account and Tate is probably one which everyone will recognize. I'm trying to think of one everyone will recognize. That one got pretty dangerous to the point where it just didn't let up. Where I was getting nervous, and I'm not even involved. I don't know either of them, but he's like sending photos of what happened to his MMA gym, and then he's sending trucks outside his house and doxing everyone and the surrounding family, demanding public apology. By the way, not even 8 hours have passed since like this since this altercation happened. This is in the first 8 hours. So like at that point in time, it's like, man, how much worse can it get?
Yeah.
He was suing him just to tie him up in litigation. He knew the case was bogus, but he's like, I'm just going to sue you just so you have to go bankrupt paying the lawyers to defend yourself. It's really, really low down war tactics, but it was one which was just so wildly entertaining. I don't justify it. I think it went too far. And I also think the Culty Bra is like a pretty cool guy.
That was a special time.
It was one for the history books. And then the third one, I want to say the one where it's your friend and my friend, really.
Yeah, sure.
Because it was just an interesting one.
Yeah.
But, you know, probably Luke and Ty Frankel, to the point where one of them actually left the internet for a while. I think they're both great guys, but it was just one which was so entertaining because it just kept on going.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favorites.
I would have to say, it's difficult to put a number one, but I would have to say Tate and Mike Stutchbury.
Okay.
Which is like, maybe that's like a one-sided one. But yes, so this dude was basically like a super like liberal guy that was like consistently trying to get Tate banned. I think he had gotten his accounts banned. And Tate would like make a new account and make it his profile picture, but he would show up to this guy's house in the UK with like his Bentley, I think, and just taking a picture outside, and he's like live tweeting like, hey Mike, I just want to say hello. Why are you calling the police and peering out of the blinds?
Wow. You know what? I don't think it's I'm not sure if it stemmed from Twitter, but I'd have to say whatever happened to Jack Murphy has to take the spot, man. That was a bad exposure. It deserved it because like, how can you participate in that lifestyle? But like, man, it's one of those things where it's so embarrassing that you get passively embarrassed despite not knowing him.
Yeah.
It's bad.
That one was very bad.
Yeah, it's I don't know how you can recover, really.
Number two, man, that's a good one. Number two, it's kind of difficult. Who even had
Man, I'd probably say between Nima and that Luke All guy, easily, my friend Nima.
I would have to say number two would have to be GG33, Gary, and Tate. That is like... They've had beef since 2015. Yeah, so back then, Gary, GG33, numerology guy, I've had him on this channel. He was doing the same thing he was doing right now, and he was kind of talking about betting and casinos and stuff. Yes. And Tate was vehemently like coming at him. And he was like, yo, this guy's a fraud. If he knows this, this, and this, then he'll tell me the answer to this tomorrow. I'm about to go to the casino. He gets GG33 banned. Gary banned. He gets his, I think he was Matrix Prime at the time. And I think he was faceless at the time.
Tate?
No, Gary.
I was going to say, yeah.
I think he was faceless because I didn't know what his face looked like. And then he comes back and he had this army of like GG33, like just people. And he would come back and he basically, over time, like took advantage and like made it his life mission to like dismantle Tate and slowly take people away from him. Like one of Tate's biggest accounts, he basically turned that into a GG33 account.
I remember Gary posted exposing some ecom kid years ago, and he had damning evidence which like no one else could find. And it was wildly impressive. Him and Tate having a beef is interesting. It's interesting because you can't really say who won. They both succeeded so well. Yeah. And there's no public feud which is still, visible to people. And there's nothing either of them have done for me to dislike or even care about. the Gary guy used to show up in my feed a lot more back in the day. Forgot he existed. I saw the video. I was like, oh yeah, this is interesting. And I think they both have interesting points. It's just the whole numerology thing I could never get into, because internally it feels like it conflicts with religious beliefs. It sounds like an occult practice.
He's got an answer for that one all the time.
I'm sure he has an answer for it, but I don't think it aligns with religion, and I don't even think it's like untrue. I just don't think I want to be involved with it.
Yeah, and I think I would say number 3, because that one was kind of like an artifact I pulled out. I would say honorable mention before number 3, because this wasn't really a beef.
Yeah.
It was Roosh V retiring everything.
Oh.
Him going to like Christ and taking down his form and his books and everything.
I thought it would be a marketing ploy.
That's what people said. People saying he was grifting, but I was like, where is he making money? This guy was broke.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like, yeah.
And he had this era during COVID of legendary live streams, which like I have to go to BitChute to watch now.
Wow.
Like I'm talking, this guy, I think he's underrated in his level of talent, because this guy would rip 5-hour straight live streams prepared with slides and not answer chat, not take a break other than to go to the bathroom and come back. And it would be comprehensive. And I was like, whoa, this guy's actually
impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good writer and he's a good presenter. So it was unfortunate to see him kind of like completely go out of the internet. But for the third beef, I would have to say it kind of escaped me right now. I would say Soulbra versus GBH when that was going on.
It's more of like less of a beef and more of just it's like, is it a beef if one side is winning so much more than the other? I think GBH took it home, no question.
Oh, absolutely. It's not.
Took it home, no
close.
question.
Yeah. And then that other guy got exposed for some other thing. I don't have anything.
They're all going to get exposed for something eventually.
Yeah, I don't have anything wrong. I don't have a problem with any of these guys. I just find all this stuff entertaining.
I just think something's going to get it. If you're that famous, something's going to surface.
Nah. So yeah, I would say that, because man, Money Twitter has changed a ton. Like, what happened to people like some Scotty SS guy, if you remember that guy?
I think it's just transitioned into something which has become more public for the world to see, which is interesting if you were OG a part of it. Like people like the Soulbra account or stuff like that. They're like wildly famous now. Like you could say that word to like most people and they'd be like, oh yeah, that account. Or like collaborating with like the Brian Zero guy. It's quite impressive to see like how big some of them get. But it is a space that is rampant with like autism, so you have to be careful.
Yeah, one thing I never got into was like it kind of merged a little bit with crypto space to a degree, which I wasn't really too fond of because I don't really like the crypto stuff. But it has morphed a lot. It's very personal brandy. It's very posturing. I think there's like a BT, like a BC, where it's like before Tate and after Tate.
Absolutely.
Era.
Yeah.
With everyone kind of like taking this lifestyle, Lamborghini, etc., and making that the face of the brand, which is interesting enough because that used to be a YouTube thing, YouTube ads, and then now it's shifted into Twitter.
I remember like Andrew Tate was like OG in that space like years and years ago, to the point where I have like messages from his old account like saying join the war room and stuff, which I wasn't gonna do. I have no interest in any of it, but it was interesting. Like that's how intimate and close the space was. Where like Tate could just message you and say join this, which was like interesting. And he was still like wildly successful then compared to how he is now. But that's how it is, and it's just transcended into this overly public space. And crypto really did its thing in bleeding into every space. It bled into music. Tory Lanez embraced it. It went into YouTube. A lot of your biggest YouTubers went all in on crypto. Bart Baker being like the biggest example. 10 million followers, subscribers, going all in on crypto. Big YouTube channels surfaced from it, like BitBoy or whatever they were. It really had the world in the palm of its hand, to the point where fashion brands were wildly involved with NFTs. Givenchy involved with NFTs, Prada, Adidas, Louis Vuitton had a game centered around like NFTs and Web3. They all ate it up. They all invested into the technology. How it performed, I mean, it's not really a thing like it was a couple of years ago. Whether it comes back is to be determined. But if something's relevance is controlled entirely by the price in which it's sold at, it's never going to be consistent because things go up and down in price. And if the game is only good, if the artwork is only valuable while Ethereum is worth something, it's not really ever going to catch on. But every brand really did invest into the tech, and it just bled into so many spaces.
Yeah, kind of like the popular thing right now too is like all these groups, all these stuff that's going on there. You even, after like forever not having done that, I'm pretty sure you even started one too. So like, kind of what was your motivations around that? Was there any hesitation before doing that?
The group?
Yeah.
The group was just to kind of share knowledge and insight, but it's not a group which consistently charges people money. It's something you have to pay once to get into. Never promoted it. And then you never have to pay again. I didn't tell that to people at the beginning, but nobody got like rebuild. And it was like a small, intimate community, and it was very specific. It wasn't for like anyone to join. You had to be in the advertising space. It was really a business product. It wasn't something that like Andrew Tate has where like he's saying, you need to make money and you need to join this. Like, no, this was for people who are well in the advertising space as sophisticated ad buyers. They should join. Or people who are in a service-based business, they need to join. But it's not for anyone. You already have to be in business to kind of be in.
Yeah, because how do you manage to keep a lot of issues that people run into with service-based is it eats at their margins, and they have to have a lot of employees, so a ton of overhead. So how do you manage to keep yours lean and very, very profitable?
It depends on what the end goal is. For example, I have a friend with a similar business to mine in a different industry, so he serves like product-based brands where it could be anything. It could be clothing, it could be a utility-based product, it could be like a pet product, whatever it may be. And he went in 1 year from like 0 employees to 60 employees, and at peak it was like at 100 employees. And the margins were obviously wildly compromised, but it created value elsewhere. He could sell it for something significantly worth more. He went from in a year to 0 employees to well over 100 employees, and it compromised his margin and what would actually you'd be able to take home. But revenue grew, and he was able to sell it for significantly more money. I know it depends on what you want from the business. If you want cash right now, do you want to sell it for a bunch of money in the future? And you have to make that compromise. And if you keep your overheads low, you might not be able to sell it for as much, but you'll have less employees, but you get to take all of that money home now. So it's really a question of when do you need the money, what's the purpose of the business, and what the end goal is. I'd say the easiest way to keep it lean is to just really not outsource anything until you truly need to, and then don't scale your revenue numbers for revenue's sake. Focus on what you're actually taking home. And as I said, pay yourself first. You make $10,000 and then you have $2,000 in expenses. Do you reinvest that 8 into hiring someone, or do you pay yourself and then you have real money to buy real things and pay real bills? Depends on what you need, depends on the lifestyle requirement you have. But generally, don't outsource things and don't grow for the sake of growing. If you're comfortable, then grow it moderately. I think people are in this tech company philosophy way of thinking where it's move fast and break things. It's a famous quote from Facebook where you have to continuously grow and evolve and try new things. But, it's a completely different company with different shareholders and different valuations. You don't have to double the business every 6 months. You grow at a rate where it's sustainable and you're taking care of yourself, and you don't have a bunch of things coming out. And there's a difference between something which is vital for the business and something which you're just getting for the business because it's convenient. And the more of those convenient things which you don't actually need that you omit, the more money you have for yourself to spend on things you personally want.
We were having this conversation briefly earlier, which was rapper come into a big sum of money. Yes. They're blowing bags on rent, and I was telling you some rappers that are so broke, and you're like, how does this person not have a dime to their name? So,
yeah.
What does a person do in that case? Like, let's say a rapper's consistently making money. This is usually what happens. They won't make any money. They blow up. They're getting bags off shows. At least like 20, 30, 40, 50, some of them per show. They're doing maybe a couple shows a week or a couple a month, let's say. They got an advance. Where do they live? Like, how do you think is the best way for them to approach it in the sense that they don't have to worry about money ever again in their life?
I'm not a rapper, so it's difficult, but I'll give my 2 cents as an outsider. And there's a few things I would do because we have hardcore evidence that not doing these things doesn't work. Number one, if you're a rapper and you need security, hire actual security guards. Don't get your homeboys to like help you out. We've seen recently someone wanted to get a photo with a rapper. I think it was Nardo Wick, and he's like pretty much put in a pack at this point because he's got permanent brain damage. Because a real security guard wouldn't do that. This kid wasn't a threat. Should have hired real security. And I'm sure there's lawsuits coming in which aren't gonna add, help with the costs. And then number two, who's famous for getting a really modest house despite having a lot of money that's wildly successful today? Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar, a couple of years after making some of his biggest hits earlier on in his career, bought a $500,000 house. Even for California, just over a decade ago, it's extremely modest considering he was worth well in excess of 20 million at the time. The regular house price in California was probably more than 500,000 at that time, to put it into context. And, nobody made fun of him. I think everyone was in universal agreement that he could buy so much more. And it actually helped his brand. And it made him look humble. And he really did live in that house for a little while too. He only recently got a much more expensive house. But at the same time, to buy a house, which I don't think people understand, if you're an artist, you're not necessarily a W-2 employee. You're a business owner. And unless you have a couple of years, maybe 3 years of stable tax returns, you're not going to get the mortgage to buy the house and so on and so forth. So either buy the house in cash, which is difficult because, as you said, the $1 million advance is not even money to yourself. It's a loan for the most part. And after taxes, you're not actually left with that. I'd personally not spend $30,000 a month on rent, regardless, because you're not going to own it at the end. I'm sure it's an amazing house with every feature you can have. And at the same time, I appreciate that rappers have a lifestyle they must live up to, which is this luxurious lifestyle with big houses and cool cars and chains and whatever it may be. But I think most of these rappers with really cool houses, which they're blowing a big bag on renting, they haven't even shown people. You might have gone to it if he's privately invited you to the party or whatever it may be. It's not like it's helping their personal image. These houses are kept in secrecy for the most part, but they're still expensive. The only time it comes into the public eye is when you owe 3 months of rent for $80,000, and now everyone knows. Not only did you spend a ridiculous amount of money on something that's not yours, but you didn't even pay for it. And that's when it actually becomes damaging for the brand. Personally, I would do what you have to do. I know all of these jewelers are not charging the actual price of the jewelry to these artists. There's a lot of promo going on, so you don't even have to buy the chains for the most part. And whether it's a $300,000 chain from Ben Baller or a Johnny Dang chain, to 99% of people, they look the same. You couldn't even tell. But given that music and relevancy is such a spin of the dice and you have no guarantee that you'll be relevant in 10 years' time, I wouldn't treat it as a job where you're making $1 million in your first year, which means you're going to make it in every subsequent year. I treat it as a lottery win. You might not have it next year, and then you do whatever you got to do. So hold on to as much as you can, which I think a lot of these artists don't do, which is why most of them end up broke. And if you really look back at it, artists like Drake, who are wildly successful now, their careers are solidified, never has to work again in their life. They weren't really egregious with their money in the first couple of years of their career. 2009, 2008, Drake wasn't really spending, or at least claiming that he was, despite probably having a lot of money from his deal. And I think they're just, and it's just a new money phenomenon. People who don't or had no original prospect of making this type of money run into it unexpectedly at some point, and they don't know how to deal with it. And I think people in business deal with it, face the same problem, but it's to a much larger magnitude to someone who's an artist because they were never in the world of business. So it's even more of a shock, and they lose it pretty quickly. Sometimes it's not as much of an issue because they maintain their relevancy and they smarten up with their money and they get a system in place. But for the most part, someone who's never seen $1 million in their life gets sent $1 million as an advance and they don't know how it works. So lawyer up is probably the most important advice, and not the label's lawyer, get your own lawyer.
You think that's a similar phenomenon that occurs with these like internet money guys?
Absolutely. I think there's, it's going to happen, and people are getting these big kick deals and whatever it may be. well, look, there's no guarantee that Kick's going to be around. Kick's clearly paying above market value for these people, which is why the world is so shocked at these deals. It's why they're paying so much more than Twitch and YouTube. It's not going to exist. And I think you don't even have to take my word for it. Who did you watch on YouTube 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And who are you watching right now? Who you watched 3 years ago probably isn't even who you watch today. And it's not because you've decided to not enjoy their content. It's just they fall off. People watch different things. The algorithm decides that their content isn't favorable. There was this whole edgy humor niche of YouTube in 2016 with like Leafy and the way H3 acted and Drama Alert and iDubbbz. And it's not like all of these people came to God and decided to change their ways. They just started getting $1 per 1,000 views instead of 5, and they decided they needed to transition their content. And because of that, a lot of them lost their relevancy. We're not watching them to the same degree that we used to half a decade ago.
Speaking of, you knew about him more, well, his current happenings, which is Hasan Piker. So, like, what's going on with him right now?
Regardless of like political views and whatnot, Hasan Piker's had a very interesting rise to fame. His uncle is Cenk from the Young Turks. It's been one of the first ever YouTube channels, wildly successful. And then Hasan Piker kind of has his big period of growth around the 2016 presidential election. You have this guy called Hasan, but he looks white, making points which everyone agrees with. He gets mainstream success. Then he kind of goes away from the Young Turks. And by the way, he was a major reason why the Young Turks is still successful today. He's a good marketer. But then, he's in the world of politics. He's in political commentary. So he's on Twitch and he's streaming. And his view is allegedly that he's socialist. But he has a $3 million house and a closet which is significantly more expensive than a regular person needs, which is fine. But if you're pushing for socialism and you're benefiting so wildly from capitalism and then giving back to capitalism by spending the money that it's given you, obviously it's going to raise some eyes. And, the same way artists go out of style and brands go out of style and YouTubers go out of style, right now it looks like he's not having the best month because the viewership is down and he's losing whatever important debates are to be had, and he's making claims about a really serious political situation which aren't true. It's dangerous, and people lose relevancy on Twitch all the time and streaming all the time. Ninja, Tfue, Myth, I remember watching them years ago. I don't know what any of them are doing right now.
Myth is averaging 65 viewers now.
I mean, you can post a video on TikTok and you'll probably accidentally get at least 80. So that speaks for itself.
Yeah. I think a lot of these guys weren't prepared, especially, the streaming game is
you either,
different.
you die a hero or you live long enough to sell $7 cookies to your fans.
That's $28 cookies.
$28 cookies?
Yeah.
Wow.
No brokey discount. So you
no
better
brokey discount.
You better get your paper up.
Well, if I save hard enough, I'll get a couple of packs, but we'll see at the end of the month.
Now, I heard they don't get stale either. They've got some preservatives because if you pay $28, you don't want to eat them all at once.
They don't get stale, but every big food company hasn't found out, but Pokemon's company has found out.
Exactly. They worked a year on the formula.
There's a lot of stories of influencers, and I'm not saying it's her case because I think her cookies probably did sell ridiculously well. She only needs to sell a handful of packs to make a crap ton of money. That's how expensive they are. So, but she also had like a makeup line or a cosmetics product before that.
That must have flopped.
I don't know. If there was a lot of women watching it, it would have been perfect because there aren't a lot of women streamers. But the question is, are a lot of women and young girls watching Pokemon streams, or is it a lot of 12 and 50-year-old guys with no gap in between the ages to men?
I'm pretty sure Twitch is 97% male.
I wouldn't be surprised. Absolutely. It has to be. So I don't think the cosmetics product did that well. But there is, cases where there is a really good fit. Logan Paul had Maverick, and it made millions and millions when the merch was nothing substantial. Him and KSI have made Prime, which has done $1 billion in sales. If you isolated Prime and took away their status from it, is it any better than Gatorade, or is it significantly worse?
It's worse.
It's worse. And from and from a hydration point of view, we don't need to get into the science, but I think, more qualified people have gone into it than me.
Yeah, Derek will give us a segment.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's got KSI and Logan Paul behind it. And it was a good fit because they're in the world of, sports and entertainment. So a hydration drink makes sense. Making cosmetics for your young male audience is arguably the stupidest thing you could do. And there's plenty of stories. An influencer with 2 million followers releases the wrong product, sells less than 12 units. I mean, I'm pretty sure you could just make a website and within a year, you might accidentally sell 12 units. And yet she sold 12 units to an otherwise very engaged following of 2 million people.
Yeah. What do you think a company is thinking when they're going to Pokimane for a makeup collab? Because anyone in their right mind that's a viewer or somewhat tapped in is like, yeah, this thing is not going to sell, bro.
It could have been that she wanted to make a makeup line and she reached out to a makeup company, in which case a makeup company is like, I don't care, you're buying the product to sell on to your customers. But, wrong collaborations happen all the time and people think it's going to work when it doesn't. And in theory, you could argue it does work. Twitch was less of a thing than it is today. You could have anticipated the female audience coming in. She was one of the first big female streamers. You could assume that women would kind of watch. And they were wrong and they don't talk about the product anymore. But, there's plenty of YouTubers who have released products which people don't like, plenty of artists which have released stuff people don't like, and even big brands releasing stuff which people just absolutely hate, including brands as big as Apple releasing things to this day which people are not on board with, like the headset. The VR headset in general has not yielded the success they expected, with the exception of Meta and the Oculus, because they positioned it as a game system, in which case it sold more than all the other game systems for Christmas combined, because it's a $200 console.
Even Maverick, like you were saying, Becker was rocking Maverick on the regular.
Yeah.
In his YouTube videos. That's how big it was.
And everything comes to an end. I mean, how many lines, you forget sometimes how many projects these people put out. They had Maverick, Jake Paul had 3 different clothing lines. Now he has Better, and then they had Team 10, and there was all this other stuff course they were doing. Yeah. They had a YouTuber course, financial freedom course. I mean, worst audience, people who aren't even old enough to have bank accounts, but you live and you learn.
Yeah, it escaped my mind.
Yeah.
I had this question that I was going to ask. I think it was regarding, I don't know if it was crypto, but I think it was some sort of controversy. Apologies. Oh, people that ride the wave properly. I think, personally, I don't think anybody's done YouTube better than PewDiePie in the sense that he's like, hey, I mean, he came in at the right time, right place, etc. He was consistent, number one. He had gotten a studio, he had gotten a full-time editor, he was putting stuff out daily. He was kind of doing what he wanted, but then things start to shift.
Like when he said the N-word? He maintained his relevancy after that. In fact, honestly, made him look cooler to a lot of people.
Yeah, he did. Especially when he shouted out those other YouTubers, which people decided to come at him for Disney and that whole apocalypse thing. But what I was saying is he didn't shift his content. He just stayed the same. He rode his wave, he made his money, and he's now he got married, went to some different country. I think he's living in Japan now.
Japan, yeah.
And he's just kicking it. And he doesn't have to deal with the stress of being number one. And this is one thing that I talk about a lot in private to people, which is hey, you're better off being number 17, 18, 19, or you're better off being number 21 than in the top 20 and even in the top 10, because that's when all the eyes are on you. So any slight fuck up is monumental at the top.
Absolutely. And it was good that the number one position was in his hands for a while because he didn't care. I genuinely don't think it mattered when T-Series overtook him, despite him making the promo around it. It was more orchestrated by Mr. Beast really than PewDiePie at that point. And he just put out content. It was authentic. He held the number one position for years and years and years. I mean, I'd get bored at that point. I'd want someone to overtake me at that point. And, he is very good at creating a gap between his professional online persona and his personal life. I mean, does anyone really even know where he lived or what his house looked like? He never showed it. People know he lived in the UK. That's about it. Now he lives in Japan. That's all he's really revealed. He's very good at like creating that gap, and it was probably for the best because nobody had more eyes than he did. And, you know, it's still his responsibility to take care of him and his wife or whatever it was, and still have that good connection with his audience. He did it really well, and it was absolutely at the perfect time. It was when gaming content was on YouTube, big time, 2013, 2011.
I remembered my question. I won't use top three because that's the wrong connotation.
Yeah.
But 3 crazy fashion scandals or like big blowbacks that are at the forefront of your mind, like the ones that you remember the most and the brands associated with them.
Number one, which comes to mind just because it's one which kind of got overlooked quite interestingly, is and I'll say it's fashion because it does count, as H&M and the coolest monkey in the jungle hoodie.
I was gonna say.
People in South Africa, interesting country, destroyed those stores on the inside because it was so racist of what they did. I genuinely think it wasn't intentional. We have to remember what the backstory was. It was a children's hoodie, only available in children's sizes. And if it was worn by a white child, no one would care. You know, people call kids like monkeys and stuff. It's not a racist term. It's just like, you know, you're playful, like a monkey could be. And they had like a black kid wearing it, and everyone lost their mind. What benefit does it have to H&M, this multi-billion-dollar company, to prove that they're racist? Who even represents H&M? What individual, what entity represents them? They're a company which, from a business point of view, is very interesting because the way that brands have 2, 3, 4 seasons a year, H&M has 52. Every week there's a new season in their eyes. They have new products coming out. And it was a major blowback. But I think the most interesting one is that nobody really ever spoke about it, and it was not swept under the rug. It went on for a long time, like weeks. But then it's never been spoken about again. And I think people's inability to see how it was genuinely an honest mistake is wild to me. Because do you think the head office or the corporate direction at H&M decides who the models are, where it's going to go on the website? And this is like on the kids section of a website, probably merchandised by someone making 30 grand a year. They had no agenda. But it was a huge scandal, one which they still apologized for. And then they continued being one of the biggest companies in the globe. The second one would be Balenciaga's whole situation, because 90% of it is baloney, it's made up, and then people just started adding to the conspiracy and connecting all these dots which don't make sense. I think the craziest one is when if you type in Balenciaga, allegedly on Google Translate, it translates to Baal is king, and Baal is some evil character from whatever point in time. It's called Balenciaga because it's named after Cristobal Balenciaga, who was a real person with real birth records who existed in the late 1800s up until, you know, when he died decades ago. And he wasn't part of the elite, so on and so forth. In fact, he was the son of a seamstress. And and to this day, is one of the only fashion houses to succeed from Spain. It's a Spanish brand. Cristobal Balenciaga is Spanish. And they started off doing dresses, nothing like what they do today. In fact, they did dresses, and there was a time where the recession and the economy was so bad that to show you the samples of the dresses, instead of putting them on a mannequin, they would make them in children's sizes. And then if you liked the dress, you would buy it, and then they would have the money to make a full-size one for you. That's how bad the economy was. Cristobal Balenciaga died before it took this new creative direction, and it was owned from a manufacturing company for a long time. And, you know, until Kering purchased it and bought it back to life. And then they put Demna, who was the creative director and owner of Vetements, which was a different clothing brand entirely. And this whole mysterious and controversial and, you know, that type of brand where you don't understand what's going on and you think there's an agenda. That's just Demna's creative direction. It's meant to be mysterious and provocative. But then they start seeing all these documents and the photo shoot, and Balenciaga's whole thing is, hey, it's our photo shoot company. It's our production company. The blame ultimately lies on them because they should have checked this. The whole point of having a creative director is to check stuff like this. And that photo shoot, having the kids in there was strange, but it's not like they're pedophiles. I mean, who is the pedophile exactly here? Balenciaga is owned by Kering, which is a conglomerate which owns a bunch of other brands, including Gucci. If you're going to label that to Balenciaga, you must also cancel every other brand that they're owned by. It was a wildly, taken out of context situation. It was still a little suspicious. And you had people like Omi and a Hellcat burning all of his Balenciaga. I mean, you may as well burn it because you're going to jail in 3 days. Don't store it. And a lot of people were just getting rid of it. And now they're buying it again. And if you went into the store a week after it happened, not on the internet, people were buying it because they don't care. It's hard to cancel something you've spent thousands of dollars on. It's in your best interest for it to blow over. And then the third one is probably Dolce & Gabbana's fallout with the Chinese market. That was really an interesting one. It's interesting because there's a lot of nuances in the Chinese market where they really appreciate when a brand uses like a European model or a Slavic model because it's just the aesthetic they're into and it's what they use to sell product. But to be canceled by the Chinese market, one which people overlook because it's just China, it's huge and monumental to European fashion. And it was a message to pretty much every company saying, don't fuck with us. And they never did. And an interesting fact is China's e-commerce market for buying products online is more valuable than the US and the following 5 markets combined. All of the Amazon, all of that stuff we spend money on, and then add the next 4 countries, so including the US, Canada, Australia, they're still smaller than China's e-commerce market. This one country. And population for population, they're not wildly different either. So that was an interesting one. And it's one which all 3 have recovered from, which I think is good.
What was it exactly that they had gotten mad about? Was it the use?
It was the use of the models, which they didn't like. It was, and it was mimicking or like making fun of Chinese culture, which they didn't like. And it was, I believe it was on the product and website too, but it lasted 5 weeks, I remember. And DG was like first of all, Dolce & Gabbana was in big trouble anyway. And this really didn't help.
Yeah. They needed another riff-raff song to get them back on top.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes to the point where your $1 billion brand can only be saved by riff-raff, I mean, I'd really just follow the Section 7 and keep it pushing.
But one of the moments that just sticks out to me the most, not for the actual controversy, was the Gucci mask. Because the Gucci, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because immediately after, everybody's getting mad. Everyone's like trying to rally together. They're like, hey, we're not buying Gucci anymore. And then TMZ runs down on none other than Floyd Mayweather. And they're like, hey, man, you're going into Gucci? And he's like, yeah, I'm going shopping. And they're like, oh, well, everybody's boycotting Gucci. I think he just said, I don't even remember what he said, but he just said something so outrageous and funny. And he just went into Gucci anyway and bought the shit. Yeah. And came out. And everyone got upset about it. But I was looking at what are you upset at Floyd Mayweather? What are you going to do to Floyd Mayweather? You're going to
Who's going to stop him?
Yeah, you're going to stop watching his fights. You want to see him lose anyway, so you hate watch anyway.
Are you going to physically stop him walking into the store? I wouldn't want to do it. But I mean, it's funny, I don't even think Floyd knew about this situation, by the way. He definitely didn't know about the situation as he was walking into the store. A similar story was with the thin blue line and James Harden wearing the thin blue line mask. And it's like, how could you do this? And then I think Young Thug had to come in and be like, yo, he doesn't use the internet. He doesn't know. He just thought it looked cool. Which I truly believe was the case. He probably just saw the mask, thought it looked cool, and wore it. I don't think James Harden understands what that blue line on the US flag means at the time.
Now, this is do you think Travis Scott stole A$AP Rocky's swag?
No.
Fashion-wise?
No.
No.
No. They're different. I personally think Travis Scott's style is better than A$AP Rocky's as well. A$AP Rocky is being, first of all, he's wildly more respected in fashion, and you see some amazing outfits come from A$AP Rocky, but more from a point of view of appreciation. Like you see A$AP Rocky wearing this very intricate outfit, which has clearly been styled by someone, and you're like, wow, that's like really fly, it's cool, but you wouldn't wear it.
Yeah, hell no.
Travis Scott wears stuff which you probably would wear or you could get away with wearing. A$AP Rocky's ability to put together outfits is something you can appreciate as an art form, but I think to say if someone dresses well is where it would be like, would I wear that or could I picture wearing that? If you're just looking at it and appreciating it, it's not the same thing. And to say he stole his style would mean that they're very similar to each other, which I don't think they are. I think Travis has definitely done a better job at it from an everyman point of view. But I think when it comes into the stages of like high fashion, maybe it's A$AP Rocky. But I think really people just have this saying that A$AP Rocky is just the best dressed man in the world or whatever it may be because all these Instagram posts go viral or these Twitter posts go viral of some outfit that A$AP is wearing. But at any point you see Travis Scott, it's not a bad outfit either, but it's very different to what A$AP wears.
What about Travis versus Young Thug, fashion-wise? Historically speaking, let's look at their resume, so to speak.
I mean, from like, I'm still, you know what? I don't even I really dislike Travis's last album and I'm still defending him. I hate to have to do it. But what has Young Thug worn that someone would actually wear themselves? I mean, he wore a dress in his album cover. What's he been wearing lately? Prison overalls. You know, I don't think Young Thug is respected in fashion the same way he's respected for being funny, entertaining, and talented.
And allegedly the leader of a criminal organization.
Well, he's just truly humbled under God. That's all it is. But, you know, I think the funniest thing of that entire trial is Gunna being in there. Like Young Thug being in trial and whatever it may be, I think that's fine. He said what he said. There's some evidence which might suggest he did it. I don't know. But I don't picture Gunna being able to do it. I don't even think Gunna understood where he was until they released him. I think he was like, hey, this doesn't look like my house. Maybe they like redecorate. I truly don't think Gunna has the comprehension to understand what was going on, let alone be wildly involved with this criminal organization, which has the whole state of Georgia on its ass trying to figure out how it got to this.
Yeah. I do think they need to, like, if they're going to run, you know how back in the day they ran the TI advertisements?
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, you know, Crime Stoppers. I think something like that, they got to do it with like Gunna and telling, because, I mean, just look at the promo, right? Like Gunna tells, allegedly. The dude told. Let's keep it a buck.
I don't know if an Alfred plea is telling. I also don't think he had the ability to understand what he was signing. I mean, if a baby signs a documentation, are you going to look at the baby like it's crazy? No, like Gunna probably just got told by his lawyer, hey, write your name here. I want an autograph, and he did it. You think he read did you see the documentation he signed? Do you think he was able to comprehend what it said?
Absolutely not, but he knew what was coming out of his mouth.
I don't think anyone cared in the end, so he won, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the best promotion you could ever do to get people to start telling. He lost like 80 pounds. The dude's like throwing footballs across the field now. He's got hit songs. He's like the most loved guy ever.
But didn't Thug also say like, hey, Gunna didn't snitch?
No.
What did he say? Did he comment on it?
His closest family members, his brother, sister, all of that, they've all distanced themselves from Gunna. They're like, we don't fuck with this guy. And as well as 21 Savage and all these other people that at the time, before Gunna was released, you know, they were doing the whole, hey, man, we got to wait and see what Thug has to say. We got to wait and see what happens. We don't have
Which is understandable.
Yet. Yes. But when he came out, nobody was messing with him. Nobody's getting anywhere near him, which leads me to believe.
And he still won.
Yeah, he did. Exactly.
Yeah.
But how long can he win for without the element of collaboration? Because we have to admit that Gunna got a lot of help. There are certain rappers that get a lot of help by being around other rappers that are in similar lit levels. And
yes.
it's kind of like a cheerleader effect for rappers.
Yeah, okay.
And he was one of those.
Yeah.
But can he exist on his own? For an extended period of time, we'll have to see. Because even Lil Baby doesn't mess with him, and Lil Baby messes with Young Thug.
I think we're witnessing a decline of Lil Baby as we speak, though.
We are, 100%.
And it's unfortunate because I don't really know what he did.
He dropped trash.
Did he? Well, I didn't hear it. That explains it. But also, how long are we going to distance ourselves from Gunna? How long is it going to happen for? Let's just say, what is the likely outcome of this trial? Probably that there's going to be a conviction on at least Young Thug, because too many people have taken the pleas. I think it's reasonable to say it's unfortunate, but you're not going to see Young Thug for a long time. And I think once he's actually locked up, it's in his best interest to not put any blame on Gunna, because Gunna's going to be one of his biggest sources of income while he's locked up, assuming they still have some deal together.
No.
And also, I don't think it was snitching in the same, I don't think he was really involved to begin with. But I do think there's going to be some type of mainstream talent which is going to be above this whole case and just work with Gunna. It only takes one, which is also the thing. It just takes one for the floodgates to open. Say Drake does a song with Gunna. Now everyone's going to do a song with Gunna. Whether he does or not is to be determined. But I think there'll be enough to get a project completed. I mean, I'm not too plugged into it, but who's openly associating with Gunna before the trial concludes? Is there anybody?
Not hip-hop, honestly, that I can think of. But
really?
Does he need anybody hip-hop?
Depends if that recent project was recorded before or after getting locked up.
Good. I think a lot of it was after, because a lot of bars were kind of referencing what was going on.
I mean, he made it work the first time. I guess he can keep on going. But I think he needs to... A lot of his brand was rooted in humor, unfortunately, for him.
Yeah, it was. The Drip or Drown
The Drip or Drown, the album cover, Rihanna dressing up as him for Halloween, I believe it was.
The eating memes.
The eating memes. I think the most iconic one was when you see Thug flying this helicopter. And you're like, what the fuck? Young Thug has a pilot's license? But there's someone next to him. You're like, oh, it's probably a qualified veteran of a pilot next to him, so it's all good. And then it pans and it's Gunna. And now you're truly scared to be on that helicopter. And that meme was really beneficial in a way for his career. But realistically, I think people will care less and less as this stuff goes on. I mean, did he snitch, did he not? The fact that it's controversial in and of itself and there's no definite answer is to his benefit. Whereas with the case of 6ix9ine, not only did he snitch, he openly admitted to snitching and he then tried to justify it. There's no question whether he did it. It's a bit of a gray area for someone like Gunna.
Before we kind of close out, I think this is like a home runner for the last one, which is Diddy, fashion, and business, and more recently what just happened.
Yeah.
So kind of give us your perspective on, number one, Sean John, him eventually selling it, then buying it back. Him, basically the whole meme is yo, Diddy's never really done anything. And
well, I have a car, so I don't want to say too much, but what I will say is, Sean John and Ciroc are not lucky strikes. That Diddy is a very well-accomplished businessman. I think he loves what he does. He loves the world of business. There's that iconic clip of him closing a deal and then celebrating like crazy. And I believe it's a real clip, and I believe he's had situations like that all the time. I think the way Fat Joe explained it, where he was giving everyone Ciroc and getting it in the videos, and it's like, yo, thanks, Diddy. Now is promotion for Diddy. The same way Sean John succeeded. There's this whole meme, who wears Sean John? Well, clearly someone's wearing it. It's not selling online. It's not in any fashion shows. You know who would wear it? The same people who wore Rocawear. So where does he put Sean John? He puts it in Macy's. Who shops in Macy's? People who aren't all the way there mentally, and they're buying it. And that's what happened. Sean John sold a lot. Macy's eventually phased it out, but it wasn't something which cost him a lot of money. It didn't have a huge marketing budget behind it. Clothes, once you're in the ebb and flow of everything, it's not the most ridiculous thing to promote from a logistics and production point of view. And his designs weren't out there. They were pretty simple track tops and sweatpants with Sean John written over them. A lot of people probably bought Sean John at Macy's and didn't even know it was Diddy or what it was. It just looked cool. And he knew what he was doing. He absolutely knew what he was doing. The same way with the Ciroc, he knew what he was doing. how many bottles even looked like that in the vodka space before him? Grey Goose was a cool bottle, but there was something different about Ciroc, the way he has maintained its relevancy. There's always a drink which has its time and it doesn't have its time. Douce is not what it was. 50 Cent has tried plenty of times. Bel Air Luxe had its time. And then there was the one drink, which it's skipping my head, but it was Cristal.
Oh, yeah.
Before that, and we know the story of Cristal. It was getting a lot of love from the hip-hop community. The chairman of Cristal said, these aren't the people we want drinking it. In comes whatever came next, Ciroc. A few came in, but Ciroc was one of them.
And Jay-Z took that opportunity to really
He took that opportunity big time. And this whole thing of, is he going to recover? Is he not going to recover? It's not really for me to say. Is he going to recover in Sean John? No, it's already been gone for a minute now. I don't think he personally cares that much. I don't think we are interested in any music he has to release. I don't think he's released music in forever. And I think this whole thing of the Cassie situation, true or not, we'll never know. We have our assumptions. I don't think it's going to change the public's perception of Diddy. The world already thinks that Diddy killed Tupac and he had a bunch of SA allegations with cleaners and maids to date. And we're still rocking with Diddy. So this whole Cassie thing isn't going to change the public perception for long. I hope he didn't do it. It's a terrible thing if he did. But I think he'll be absolutely fine. He'll momentarily step down from what he had to step down from, and he'll be right back. Remember, Dana White had to deal with a similar allegation where he was, I think, hitting his wife in a club or got caught hitting. He took some heat, and then he was right back in the game.
Yeah, but Dana White G'd up with it. He was like, yeah, you know it happens. And that's literally all he did.
That's a huge risk, though. You can't really say that. I understand if it's
he basically said that.
I know, it's crazy that it works. If you think about it, he's a very smart and calculated guy. And I understand saying that where it's like, you got caught with cocaine in your car. And Ty Dolla $ign will be like, it happens, you know? But it's like you got caught hitting a woman, your wife. It's something you can say it happens. It's like, it's up there with a lot worse crimes. It's not the same as like possession or something. But I think that he did the right thing, which is settling.
A fan base and brand that is willing to accept something like that, and I don't think that would have worked for Dana if he was head of another company.
Well, you can't also cancel Dana because he is the UFC.
Yeah.
There's no one to necessarily cancel him, but you can have a thriving business and there can still be an overarching public perception of yourself. And he circumnavigated it the same way I think Diddy has navigated much worse. I mean, we thought he killed Tupac before, and there's evidence now which suggests he might have actually sectioned it, and we still buy Ciroc.
By the way, anytime you've said we, I am not included in that we, just for the record.
Well, I don't buy it either, but I'm saying like as a society, it's still selling exceptionally well. I've never personally seen Sean John clothing. I've never bought a Diddy product besides Ciroc. Like, really?
Yeah, when I was like 8.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. But, Sean John was in a similar phase to Pastry, the shoes from the Simmons sisters, and Run Athletics, and Fat Farm, and all of these Russell Simmons stemmed brands. They weren't there to exist forever. They were there to make a lot of money for as long as they could. The Simmons sisters would thrive after Pastry, and obviously Rev Run is going to thrive with or without Run Athletics. It's... Some brands were existed for a project the same way, G-Unit brands exists. It's not 50 cents bread and butter. It exists because people are willing to buy it and it doesn't cost a lot of money to run. And you could argue from a business point of view, that's genius. There is no hype to maintain. If it sells, and inevitably it will. It's a very different business to like Nocta, Yeezy, Homer, whatever it may be.
But the thing with Diddy though is he actually dropped an album this year, I think. Nobody really cared.
I didn't even know.
I'm pretty sure he got dropped by Diageo, which was the company that he was involved with Ciroc. So he doesn't even have the liquor going on anymore. The music isn't really hitting. He doesn't have the clothes. So it's kind of like, where does Diddy go from here? Which will be interesting to see. I mean,
boo-hoo. You have 30, 40 years of life left, and you have to make your $3 billion stretch that amount. I think he'll be absolutely fine financially. I think he wants more than that. I think he wants a legacy, but I think that's pretty much been tarnished. But I don't think he needs to do anything, and I don't think he owes, and I don't think any celebrity really owes the public an update on how they're doing or what's going on. Like the same way Dr. Dre didn't have to ever actually release Detox or put out any music. He didn't have to keep Beats by Dre going. There comes a point in time where you kind of hang up the towel, and all the legends in hip hop are kind of at that age anyway. Snoop's kind of phasing out. We're seeing the same thing with a lot of other people. 50 Cent's pretty much, what's it called? The final tour or something?
Yeah, it was the anniversary tour.
20th
year anniversary.
Doesn't sound like the name of a tour where there's one to follow it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of opening way for a new generation. And it is what it is. If you really think about it, how many years left does Pusha T, Kanye West, and Drake have, considering Pusha T and Kanye West are 44 or 45? Are we going to listen to them in 10 years? Absolutely not. They maybe have 5 years left. And there's this new generation coming along. And the same way it happens with clothing and brands, because, you know, who carried hip-hop fashion? It was actually Reebok in 2005. They had a shoe with everyone, including 50 Cent, until Adidas bought them and then worked with Kanye West. They are interdependent on each other, and it's a mutually beneficial contract, but the same way people don't like their record deals, they don't like their fashion deals. And you can ideally set up independently, but it's easier said than done, and it carries a lot of responsibilities, which not everyone is focused and ready for, especially if you're already a huge celebrity with other projects and stuff to do.
All right. Any last words? You got your routine down after having to do it once already?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just memorized the script and just kept it going, but it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me. I've been watching your videos for a long time before all of this. I want to say thanks to the guys like filming and producing and whoever's going to edit this as well. Shout out, you know, I didn't get much opportunity to speak about them, but, you know, whatever success I have in business or don't have, whatever the opinion is, it was wildly, you know, shaped and focused because I had a loving mom and dad who were also in business and taught me a lot of the things which, you know, really does help. And it's something which most people don't have. So I acknowledge that. And, you know, thanks to everyone who's been riding with me along the way. Shout out to my clients, shout out to my girlfriend, Daniela. And, you know, shout out to your audience. This isn't the typical content that they watch. It's more centered around hip hop culture and yes, the business around it. But to have someone on who's not involved in music